Exploited by many, understood by few.
My guest is Josh Conviser, Hollywood writer and novelist. He's the author of Echelon and now Empyre, the first two books in a planned near-future trilogy hybridizing the genres of science fiction and spy thriller. Josh, welcome to the Marketplace of Ideas.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So, the first book in the series, the first book, Echelon, it's a what-if novel. So could you tell us what the what-if is?
The what-if is, it looks at the state of information technology and specifically the surveillance systems within the NSA. When you hear comments in Washington about domestic eavesdropping, that's coming out of a system called Echelon. And my novel, Echelon, looks at what might happen to such a system in the future as technology gets more and more advanced, and how that might impact society and the world in general, and then how it might end up creating a wild thriller for my readers.
So what's happened between now, the world of today that we all know, and the world of Echelon?
As far as technological progress, plenty has happened, but as far as social progress, it looks about the same as the world today. Basically, technologically, what's happened is our computer processing power has gotten more and more advanced, more and more capable of handling the kind of information that's flowing through these spigots like Echelon. So, while it's not a huge problem or a huge issue right now that such systems exist, in the future, when we are more capable of really processing that huge amount of data, all of a sudden you've got a situation where there really is one small group of people managing the flow of information around the world. And obviously this has both good and bad effects, and that's the beginning of the book.
So one of the technological concepts that you've used in the book is the concept of the singularity. And could you describe what the singularity is for this series?
Yeah, basically the idea of a singularity is that technological, sorry, that's a hard one to say, progress will advance to the point where there will be a time wherein it will be impossible to understand the future based on the past. So things will look so different that we will really be in a new reality, and that's called the singularity. So what happens in Echelon is that singularity is held back by a force within the government controlling the flow of information. So the progress of our technology is restrained. What happens in Empyre is that limit is decimated, and all of a sudden we find ourselves deep into that singularity, and we look at the world from that perspective.
But in a way, the world post-Echelon that you depict, it's a little more recognizable to us, to us, the reader.
Exactly. It looks a lot more like geopolitically. It looks a lot more like the world we have today. Without a control of information, you've got a lot of political struggles going on around the world, a lot of power plays. The threat of terrorism rears its head again, and so my hero falls back into a world that's not unlike our own, and that's where the novel begins.
So let's talk about your hero, Ryan Lang. What kind of a guy is he?
Ryan starts out as an operative within Echelon, and he's the next century's Jason Bourne. I am a big fan of Robert Ludlum and James Bond, and I wanted to create a character that was the very best in his field, and then tried to make him as understandable to us mortal men as possible. So he is both extremely capable and has some fairly serious flaws in his psyche that brings him back down to a more understandable level.
So what are those kind of flaws that separate him from your garden variety Bond or your garden variety Bourne?
Well, his rise to the place where he starts Echelon was really triggered by the death of his parents and the desire to place control on a world that is inherently uncontrollable. And that's the whole internal struggle for him through Echelon is giving up that need to control the world around him, which, as most of us have come to believe, is an impossible thing to do. So that's the microcosm. The macrocosm in Echelon is this covert force trying to control the larger course of society. So you've got these two struggles for control within the book, and both come to a crashing end by the finale.
So you've got Ryan's struggle there at the forefront, but you've got a counterpart to Ryan. You've got Sarah Peters, and she responds to this advance in technology quite a bit differently. How does she do that?
She has taken to it substantially more. Sarah is Ryan's controller through the first novel, and the two of them end up on the run from the very organization they started out working for. But she starts out by fully embracing the technology around her, and throughout she has a much more comfortable relationship with the rate of progress and with the shape of the world around her. So her needs are less about control and more about other aspects of her life.
Throughout the course of the story, you see Ryan fighting the tide, whereas you see Sarah going along with it, riding the tide.
She is. In a lot of ways, she's a much stronger character than Ryan, and she certainly buoys him through the course of the book, and then ends up becoming a much more pivotal player in the second book, in Empire.
And their responses, they stand in pretty well for ways that society as a whole can respond to changing technology.
Exactly. In general, I try to steer away from writing anything or creating anything that simply pushes away anything that's new and leaves the reader with the moral that anything new is dangerous. Because while that may be the case, progress is also incredibly exciting, and I'm personally an optimist. I think we have a lot of opportunity to make this world a better place by the technology that we create.
Is that kind of an attitude one you weren't really seeing filled in the existing field of sci-fi and spy thriller books? A little too much dystopia for you already?
Well, I won't lie. Both my books, I don't know if they're dystopias, but both of them show the dangers of technology. But it is certainly something that is, I think, easier to do. It's always easier to show a looming threat and a dark what if. And I was more interested in showing what could happen if we continued on the road today. If we continue making rational choices based on the events around us, how might the world look in the future? And I think there is a place for that, both in science fiction and in spy thrillers. It creates a great basis for an incredibly exciting spy thriller.
The genre in which these books exist, and they really exist more on the borderline between two genres. They're parts sci-fi, parts spy thriller, so they've been given the name Spy-Fi. I don't know was that your invention, that genre title?
I'm not sure if it was mine or something I heard early on, but I've been calling it Spy-Fi, yes.
Well, that's been a catchy sort of genre title. It's been what I've been calling the book so far, so I think that'll catch on. But what I was going to ask was, the way that the Ryan Lang books, they got one foot in sci-fi, one book in spy thriller, how has that affected the marketing of the books or the audience finding process for the books?
It's made it more interesting. I didn't start out with the idea of writing a cross-genre series of books. I just started out with an idea that I thought would be worth writing some books about and pushed on from there. And then only later realized that this isn't something that is pervasive in the marketplace. So it's been interesting. It's allowed me to enter two fairly different populations of readers. So, on the sci-fi angle, I've gone to Comic-Con for the past 2 years and really fallen into the science fiction world, and it's some incredible stuff. And then on the thriller side and spy fiction side, I've gotten to obviously meet a lot of fans in that genre as well, and meet a lot of my hero authors in that genre. So it's been a lot of fun.
What's been your personal relationship with those genres, sci-fi and the spy thriller? Have you had a history of reading both or lean toward one?
Well, I grew up with spy thrillers. Jean Le Carré, Forsyth, Robert Ludlum were definitely the first books that I read when I was just starting to read serious books. And I actually fell into science fiction fairly late. I fell into it in college, actually, and really fell for the cyberpunk type books. The William Gibson's Neuromancer really opened my eyes to that world, and it's still by far my favorite science fiction piece. And so both have held a lot of interest for me, and I think both are connected in that both look at the state of our world from a different angle. In spy thrillers, you're looking at our world through the filter of a world underneath that no one can see. And in science fiction, you're looking at our world through the filter of a possible future. And I think combining those two really allows for some exciting stuff.
Now, you mentioned William Gibson and especially Neuromancer as a favorite novel. What would you say that Gibson gives you that other authors in similar genres don't, as far as the what-if books?
Well, I think what he did that was really interesting to me was he really looked at the impact of technology on specific people, on one's character, and on how one would operate in a possible future. And that's what really impacted me, and that's something that I've tried to do myself in Echelon and Empyre, really show what the effect of all this outside stimulus would be on one's internal psyche. And that's the thing in Gibson that really struck home with me. And he paints a very bleak future, certainly in Neuromancer. My future is less bleak.
That's true. Although you've also explored not only how technology can help a person out with whatever their existing internal problems are, but you've depicted how they can exacerbate problems someone already has. You're just getting another mod on your body. It might make things worse rather than better for you.
Exactly, and I think there's a lot of as technology becomes more internal, as we internalize more and more of the flow of information around us and the actual mechanical technology around us, I think you're going to start seeing links between that outer technology and psychological issues that we all have. And that's something that my character Sarah deals a lot with in the second book in Empire.
Has Neil Stephenson been an influence for you in that regard as well?
Yeah, he is fantastic, and I love his capability of jumping between. I think I like his ability to jump from the future, from a cyberpunk future, into the past with his Baroque series, and then his novel Cryptonomicon is one of my all-time favorites as well.
Oh, yes, and both Stevenson and Gibson, they deal with characters who exist in the real physical world that we know today, but also they exist in a virtual dimension away from their regular lives. And in Echelon and Empyre, there's the same thing going on. What's the appeal of that? That's a concept that writers and fans keep coming back to, the virtual world that some characters live in almost entirely, and others go back and forth between.
Well, I think Gibson and Stevenson really created the first true conception of what that world might look like, and then technology has started to catch up to them. But I think at this point, you can see in a lot of our interaction with technology right now that this is something that's coming. That people are interacting with each other through a new medium, a new reality, and whether that's playing Halo with someone on the other side of the world, or even just email, I think we can only expect that that's going going to become more intense and more pervasive as we roll into the future.
I hear a lot of talk about this, about Neil Stephenson and William Gibson's dreams becoming reality. Say when people bring up, I'm not sure if you're familiar with applications like Second Life.
Sure.
And I'll read a headline and it'll say something about how there's this virtual real estate developer who's selling property to such and such character in a completely virtual world. It'll make the actual news, and I'm thinking, yeah, so I guess some of the stuff is coming true.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of hype to it as well, and who knows what the reality of that reality is going to be. But I think we can all safely say that this the way we connect with each other is going to be is only going to be more and more impacted by the state of our technology, and that these new worlds, again, be it something specific like Second Life, wherein it is truly a different world, an online reality, or even just the interchange of information through things like email and whatever the future of that may be, will have an impact on how we deal with each other as humans.
Now, was it primarily authors of fiction who got you into the subject of changing information technology affecting our lives, or is it something else that brought it to your attention, or just the fact of its change in life?
Well, I think it's certainly reading Cryptonomicon piqued my interest, but I've been thinking about doing a story on Echelon for a long time, and I think it's just inherently an interesting idea as to it's fascinated me over the past decade as to the fact that it becomes easier and easier to generate information that can be seen by a wide group of people.
Yeah.
And yet it seems like the control of that information has become more and more pervasive. You know, as there are more and more websites, we're actually looking at fewer and fewer. And it's that was one of the things that got me thinking on, well, what would the future look like, and how could this progression be manipulated by someone with the right technology?
Now, you've worked these themes, and these are getting to be pretty deep themes into your books, but the books also work as what you might call fast-paced summer reads. I mean, just a couple pages into Echelon, you've got Ryan Lang kind of zooming through an underwater minefield in the world's fastest submarine, then blasting through the top of the water onto the deck of a ship, then brawling with these guards in powered armor. And all this is after he's actually died once, for those audience members who haven't actually read the book yet.
That's right. I think, well, certainly in the first page of the book, my main character dies.
Yes, that's the most surprising. It was the most surprising part to me. You know, I'm thinking here are the Ryan Lang books, and by page 4, he's dead.
Exactly. Well, it's a good place to start. You didn't see that coming.
Yeah, you know, that's very. That's a surprise already. That kind of got me hooked. Now, I was going to ask, was that always part of it? Lang dies early.
Yeah, actually, from the very first, that's how it started. And then, as I was going through the editing process, I actually did change it so that he didn't die in that first scene. And my editor called me up and said, No, don't do that. That's a great place to start.
Oh, you don't want to change that.
I put it back in.
Yeah, you know you got something good when you got that. But
exactly.
Now, Lang dies, but he comes back with the aid of what are called drones. Tell us what the drones are.
Well, the drones are just a synthesis of a lot of the different technology and science that we are generating today. And basically what it is it makes Ryan into the first true cyborg, the first complete integration of man and machine. And while I know there's a lot of stuff that's been done on this, usually that integration and that cyborg type thing happens in a far future wherein it's a fairly comfortable interaction. And in mine, Ryan is the first guy. He's the guinea pig, and obviously that generates some issues for him.
He's the first cyborg, and he has some ambivalent feelings about being the world's first cyborg.
I just watched the first couple episodes of Bionic Woman, and it's a similar type of action there, wherein someone falls into a lot of new powers, but has a lot of issues coming out of that as well. And for Ryan, it's not just a physical thing, but it's also a shift in his reality, because he's now capable of going into what is my World Wide Web on his own through this new technology. So it vastly ups the amount of information that he's ingesting, which, again, is a tough thing to stomach.
Yeah, while I was reading it, I was reading, of course, the scenes where it's revealed that the drones will heal any of Ryan's injuries, and I was thinking, oh no, here we go, another invincible Superman as the main character, but you got around that.
No, and he's not invincible. That's certainly, and it's a tough line to find, wherein you've got the cool parts, the interesting parts of these new technologies, but you don't make yourself a hero who's a Superman with no flaws.
And now in this future, bodily harm, that's really not the worst thing that can happen to you, right?
Well, death is death, and that's the end of the line. But you can get a lot further. You can get a lot closer to that and come back.
Exactly. Now, what I was going to ask when I started this question about 5 minutes ago or so, I was going to say, how did you keep these elements in balance? The fast-paced summer read almost reads like an action movie element, along with the deeper themes about society, technology, politics, and etc. Well,
I really keep in mind the to write a thriller, you need to thrill your audience, and I think certainly coming out of writing screenplays, I'm very aware of that need for every scene to be driving you forward. And I really wanted these books to be fun. I mean, that's the whole point. They should be, books you grab in the airport, sit down on the airplane, and read right through. And I love talking about the larger ideas that percolate through Echelon and Empyre. But in the end, what I really want is people to just enjoy reading the books and to have a great time with them. And, they pop all over the world, and they have a ton of interesting technology and some great characters and hopefully a fun plot line that keeps you on your toes.
Oh, we'll get to the high technology in a moment, I promise you that. But what I wanted to ask first, because this seems like a good time to ask it, is you've spent time in Hollywood, you've done screenwriting. What has the screenwriting experience brought to your fiction? You mentioned a little bit about keeping the pacing tight, making it dialogue intensive, but how has it shaped Echelon and Empyre?
Well, I think because I truly started writing creatively in the screenplay format, I'm very, very aware of structure and how a story fits together, at least in my head, to drive action forward and to drive my characters forward. So that's something that I'm consistently aware of. I think also my books aren't incredibly voluminous. I try and cut down and cut out anything that's not really necessary for the driving action of the story, and that's something that you learn very quickly in writing screenplays that you have to do. And then I try to make the dialogue as one would speak in real life, which is an interesting thing for books, because in a lot of books, and in a lot of wonderful books, there's more of a literature dialogue, which is not how we would speak. I mean, you're not going to find very many people who would talk out a paragraph worth of conversation in one breath.
Yeah.
But so I would say writing screenplays was an incredible way to learn those things, and then getting into books just allows me to really dive in and generate a deeper story.
So you've mentioned before that you grew up essentially without TV, which limited your exposure to, I would imagine, a lot of action-y stuff, but it got you reading a lot of books. Did you decide you were going to go into authorship at that time?
Well, certainly the irony of becoming a writer for television, having grown up without a TV, was not lost on my parents. But,
yes.
But I've always been a huge reader, and I'm not sure I grew up wanting to be a writer, but I certainly grew up with the idea that writing a book would be an incredible experience, and it's such a thrill to be able to do it now and to be able to do it for a living.
Now, since you've spent time working in Hollywood development and you've published books, contrast the development process in both those areas. How are they different, the films and then the literature? Well,
there's certainly more interaction in film and television. You're constantly banging ideas off each other, and the writer is usually not the most powerful person in the room.
Mm.
So it's a much more communal effort, which can be great and can be really traumatic, depending on your experience. And on the other side of that, writing books, the writer is the person in charge, and there's only one name on that book jacket, and that's an incredible feeling. That said, it's also a more lonely experience. You don't have that kind of communal group energy.
How did you adjust to becoming essentially the one true creator of your work?
Well, I wanted it. I mean,
Yeah.
I was really driving for it, coming out of having had a couple experiences in Hollywood that were less than great. I really wanted to sit down and figure out whether or not my work had merit on its own without anyone else's efforts.
Yeah.
So that was the motivation to write a book, and it got published, and they're Random House doing the second one. So far so good on that. And then you get used to a different lifestyle, I think.
Now, you've mentioned having a much easier time getting your work out there and published and done in the literary world rather than in Hollywood. It just happened kind of quicker than you expected?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is standard. It just happens to be my experience. But I've hopped around quite a bit in Hollywood and had plenty of success, but it's all been hard fought. And then I wrote Echelon. I sent it off to my agent, and within 3 weeks we'd sold it, and sold the second one as well, which was unwritten.
I swear you're the envy of every single aspiring author. That's the situation.
I can't tell you how much fun and how exciting it's been, but I certainly have put in my time in the pain category. It was just in the film and television world.
So you're one of those successes who seems like an overnight success, but you paid your dues.
I at least paid some dues. That's certainly not to say I'm not incredibly thankful every day that this has worked out and that I continue to get to do this.
For those just tuning in, my guest is Josh Conviser, author of Echelon and now Empyre, the first two books of a planned near-future trilogy hybridizing science fiction and the spy thriller. Now, I'm going to ask you, I want to go back to your past. You've had a pretty adventurous-sounding life, and you've worked a lot of it, as it seems, into the books. What have you worked in from your past?
Well, I've done a lot of traveling myself, and I've spent a lot of time hopping around the world doing some random things. And part of my love of spy thrillers is the ability to inject characters into these wild places. So I also grew up as a mountaineer and a rock climber. So I have a lot of the great outdoors in my books, which is something that I think both spy thrillers and science fiction don't have very much of. The interaction between the natural world and technology is something that hasn't really been dealt with. So this is a tangent, but so that was something that I really tried to push in both Echelon and Empyre, is how that natural world would interact with advances in our technology and with our progress. But anyway, as far as travel, the first book goes through Scotland and Nepal and Thailand, and the second book is through Tasmania and Iceland, and all these places are, I'd say 90% of the places in the two books are places I have spent a lot of time.
So I'm going to have to ask this, maybe for the benefit of the listening audience as well as myself. How did you get to all those places? What brought you to them?
Well, I grew up in Aspen, Colorado, in a very small school that was actually set up for ski racers. So the curriculum was set because all these guys and ladies are hopping all over the world racing. and my parents decided that was a great opportunity to take my sister and I on the road, and we traveled a huge amount as a family. And it's something I just kept up with as I continued on. So I've done a lot of the backpacking. I've backpacked around the world, a lot of bumming my way through different places on this globe, and it's something I love.
What was your favorite place that you brought into the books?
Boy, that's a tough one. I think my favorite place is probably Nepal.
Oh,
and,
yes.
It is in the books, but it's it becomes a harrowing place in the books. And,
that it does. I can attest to that.
But I did a bunch of mountaineering there, and I just fell in love with the people there, and the geography is beyond anything I could imagine. Even growing up in Colorado, it makes the mountains in the States look puny.
Oh.
But that was high up on my list. And then as far as the second novel, Tasmania is another wonderful place that in which a bunch of the second novel is set.
Now, both these locations gave you an opportunity to explore, as you said, the theme of technology interacting with the natural world. And how does that play out in your books? How do technology and the natural world go back and forth?
Well, there are two different people who use it in different ways. My two main characters, Ryan Lang and Sarah Peters. Ryan uses the natural world as an escape valve from the world around him. He's a very good rock climber, and that's how he pushes out the world of technology and tries to recenter himself. So, his rock climbing is pivotal, actually, to both the first and the second book.
Indeed, the first of his deaths, or the
Exactly.
initial death, is while rock climbing. Now, you do rock climbing as well, and you've brought that experience to Ryan. How much else of yourself have you put into Ryan?
I think, obviously, he's a guy who is incredibly capable in a way that I am not. But as far as creating a character, I tried to put a lot of myself into who he is as a person. So, those things that resonate in my life are often things that I find in my characters, be they male or female or good guys or bad guys. You need to have something in there that really works for you, so you hopefully they will then feel like real people to the audience. So for Ryan, my own father died just before I started writing Echelon, and so I very deeply understood the struggles he was going through, and that's I guess probably the most intense of the connections between the two of us.
So you knew Ryan's psychology well, even if you can't necessarily pilot a super fast submarine through an underwater minefield.
Well, if I could, I couldn't tell you.
Oh, yeah. So speaking of that submarine, technology. Now, you've mentioned that in these books, the technology that you put on display is either real already or it can be real. Was that a conscious choice to use nothing but the real or potentially real?
I'm not sure it was conscious. I just most of the way I come up with stuff is I just hunt around for great ideas that are already out there, and so in looking, and I'm also very interested in how the actions we're taking today would impact our future. So I guess in that I've kind of was naturally led to looking at those things that are around us right now or that are being developed right now. And saying that the truth is stranger than fiction is almost wholly the case. Almost anything you can imagine is further along than most people would think. So it's been a ton of fun getting to do research into these different areas and then looking at what these technologies and these advances might become in the next iteration. So it's I'm not going to say that it is all completely technically accurate, but it is all possible.
So what's the wildest, most fantastical piece of technology that you saw during research and decided to include in the book?
the one that I really fell for is a company that is working on using matter-antimatter collisions to annihilate tumors within the human body.
Oh, yeah.
And that would be without, so it's done based on the speed of the interaction between matter and antimatter. So there would be no incision at all. The antiproton would slow down enough within your body to decimate the tumor. That is some wild stuff. And,
yeah, it really is.
And it's funny. I actually, one of the reviews I've got mentioned that, there are some things in there that were just way out there, and that was one of the things that was mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
When in fact it happens to be totally accurate.
Yeah, it's a real thing, and these things have gotten brought up in reviews as sort of fantasies. Then,
sometimes. I mean, I thought that was particularly funny because obviously there is some stuff that is much further out there, and you never know what is going to hit and what is going to miss as far as our progress. But I think there are amazing ideas out there, and it's always fascinating to kind of take a walk on that cutting edge and see what people are up to.
And you've talked before about actually coming here to UC Santa Barbara and seeing the nanotechnology research they've got going on right now.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, as far as a place to be looking at the cutting edge of science, Santa Barbara is unbelievable, and there are scientists here and beyond just scientists, thinkers, sociologists and anthropologists who are looking into what the impact of, who are both looking into creating this next iteration of science and technology, and then what the social impact of it would be.
Now that's interesting. What thinkers did you run across in your research, that non-scientific thinkers that went over the impacts on society and what have you of scientific progress? Or what concepts? If not a thinker, then what sort of ideas?
I think there are there's certainly a bunch of thinkers that are out there, like Kurzweil and those guys, looking again at this idea of the singularity and what. I guess I fell into the idea. There's a big debate around this idea of the singularity as to whether or not how that would impact the world. Would it create a utopia? Would it create Armageddon, or would it be somewhere in between? And I found that conversation very interesting. So philosophically, I would say that's probably the main bent of the two books, is looking into how the rate of progress would impact our both our lives and our world.
And another element of future technology that you've incorporated has been the architecture of the future, not always a subject touched upon by writers in your genres. How did you decide to include so much potentially real but very wild-seeming architectural concepts? I'm obsessed with architecture personally, and
I
have that obsession as well.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, it's and I think architecture has a big impact on how we perceive our world. So in creating this future world, I wanted it to again seem like just another step down the road that we're already walking. So everything, all the structures in Echelon and Empyre are things that are real or have been conceived of by people who are within that world. So, you look at a place that's just starting to become wild, like Dubai and the United Arab Emirates. I think in the future that is going to be an unbelievable architectural vision.
Oh yeah, it's already a sight to see. It's going to be even more so.
It's just and so as a writer, I look at that and go, oh my God, that's like the best place in the world to set a thriller.
Oh
so,
yeah,
of course, Empyre starts out there.
There were two particularly neato, I would call them, architectural concepts that you brought into both Echelon and Empyre. In Echelon, in Scotland, Sarah Peters lives in a gigantic building that is itself a city.
Right.
How did you get that?
Well, that's actually from a design by Frank Lloyd Wright.
Oh, yes.
The mile-high building.
That's right. That's right.
And I basically took that idea and said, all right, well, what would it actually be like to live in it? And then I set it in a place where I thought it might actually exist, in a place like Scotland that has an incredible topography, wherein the citizens might decide, well, let's not mess up the topography so much and try and build a single building that houses the city.
And the other thing that I thought was great was the elevated airport. Maybe you should describe a little bit in detail what that is.
It's an airport in the center of a major metropolitan city, and the idea is that it allows for you to have a transportation hub within the middle of the most populated part of your city. So the airport itself would be a structure taller than the buildings around it, and airplanes are coming in and out of that. And that was a design that I saw. I believe I saw it in the Dwell magazines.
Oh, you read Dwell too?
Oh, I'm obsessed.
Oh, I love Dwell. That's good to hear. We're gonna have to talk about Dwell sometime. So mark your calendar for that. But we're gonna get off topic if we talk too much about Dwell. You've worked in different ideas about urbanism, about urban design. Early in the Echelon, we see Ryan Lang in Los Angeles, and it's not exactly the Los Angeles that we know. It kind of is, but there are a few changes in terms of the way people live in it.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot more public transportation.
Exactly. That's what I guess everybody in LA wishes were there, but
exactly. Well,
or wishes in a way.
Being a longtime LA resident, it's certainly something that I always dreamed of.
Oh, I see.
So I did include it, but I think just no matter what, that's something that's going to have to occur at some point in a place like Los Angeles, because the traffic at some point will just become impossible.
So you see good LA public transportation as an inevitability rather than just eternal muddling through.
Oh, God, well, I said I was an optimist. So I'll say it's an inevitability, but man, it's tough going down there.
Yeah, well, it's getting denser, so maybe they'll have a justification for it.
So yeah, so that's one of the differences. The other difference is I wanted to look at what impact things like global warming would have on a world of the future. So it does have an impact on the nature of Los Angeles, and specifically Ryan lives in Venice Beach, which anyone who's from Los Angeles knows is right on the water, and so it has become bogged down over the course of years, and thus has become more of a slum than it used to be. And you'll see things like that throughout the books. In Empire, actually New York City is kind of dammed in order to hold off the rising waters around it. And then even in Empire has several scenes that take place in Antarctica, which is actually an incredibly dry place. And I've added in the fact that there is some because of a warming trend, there is some more moisture in the air, which allows for ice to be formed on the sides of mountains and things like that, which wouldn't normally happen there.
So should we take from all this that you're not exactly a global warming optimist?
Well, honestly, I don't know. I mean, I think it's too big of an issue for me to have any real opinion on, other than the fact that I think it is something that is worth watching and is worth trying to do something about. Now, how we actually impact a system that's as big as the entire world, I don't know.
So, the second book in the series, Empire, comes out on the 30th of October.
That's right.
When do you start the promotional tours for that?
Well, I will start running around very quickly after that. I've got a bunch of book signings and conventions and that type of thing through the month of November and December, and and just go on from there.
So what is the sci-fi convention experience like for the listeners who haven't been to a sci-fi convention? I haven't been to a sci-fi convention, so for me as well.
It is, Comic-Con is the main one, and it is, I don't know if you'd call it, I think I could get in trouble for saying that. It's the biggest one, and it is insanely big.
I understand it's like an aggregation of multiple conventions kind of grafted together.
It certainly seems to be the case, but I think there's definitely a science fiction bent to it. And you can always tell a science fiction convention because, you've got a good 20% of the participants in stormtrooper outfits.
That's right.
But I think there's a really interesting freedom to science fiction conventions that you don't see in the world very much, wherein people are totally comfortable falling into their fantasies and really living them out. And while some of them are intense, I really enjoy it, and it's really interesting to be part of that and to see people who are living out their fantasies. Because honestly, that's what I do on a daily basis. I might not wear the outfit, but a lot of times the world of Ryan Lang feels more real to me than my world because I've been in it for the past 8-10 hours, and it takes a while to change your perspective.
I get the impression that in science fiction, the boundary between the author and the fan is a little more permeable than in other areas of literature.
I think it is, which is a ton of fun. It means that the fans are much more interested in coming up and chatting, and the questions they ask are incredibly insightful, and you really have to be on your toes at a convention like this because people read very thoroughly, and you need to know your own stuff.
Oh yes.
But
did you do a reread of Echelon when you went on tour?
I actually did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's
got to study up,
it's a ton of fun, and the spy fiction world is great too. It's a different crew that will motivate to go to a convention, but that's the world I love as well. And for me, the perk is both getting to. The biggest perk is getting to meet people who have read my book.
Yeah.
And getting to chat with them, because that's, as a writer, that's the coolest thing in the world, to have pulled someone into another world for, 20 hours or so is an amazing thing, and I still think of it as a real honor that anyone would take the time to do that with my work. So it's a ton of fun to talk to people. And then I also am I'm a big reader, so I love meeting other authors, and that's been a ton of fun.
Who's been the coolest?
Well, I just did Comic-Con this summer, so I would say the guy I got to meet, who was I've been a huge fan of, is Richard K. Morgan.
Oh yes.
He wrote the Altered Carbon series.
That's right.
I love his writing. He does sci-fi in a film noir style that I think is just a ton of fun, and I'm a huge fan of his work, and he's a great guy.
And if I'm not mistaken, his work has a certain political angle to it too. You approach politics in the Ryan Lang books. He takes a slightly different tack.
Yes,
he does it more intensely. He's more intensely politically focused. If I'm not mistaken on that.
Well, I think he has a more. I don't know. That's an interesting question. His books are they're far future. So they're not dealing with any issues that we have today, any specific political issues. But I think we both are looking at dealing with the politics of our world through our characters and through the worlds that we create. I really like the way he weaves in politics into his book, and obviously, since mine are spy thrillers, they're innately tied to the governments and to the geopolitical issues that are around us right now.
Now, the subject of spy thrillers, I think that not everybody listening is aware that there are spy thriller conventions. Talk a little bit about what those are like.
I haven't done a ton of them, but the one that I've really enjoyed is one called Thriller Fest, which is run by I think it's ITW. It's the International Thriller Writers Association, and it's really interesting. It's got a lot of the authors that I'm really into, and it also had a ton of things, a ton of conferences and lectures by people who were actually doing the things that we write about in our thrillers.
Oh, I see. Wow.
So, there was a guy from the French Foreign Legion there.
Exactly.
And it's just not often you get to chat with someone who's come out of that. And,
it's a completely different experience.
Yes. Definitely more, a little more conservative in outfits.
Oh, that's undoubtedly true.
Fun.
No stormtroopers.
Exactly.
Anybody dressed as Jason Bourne?
Well, I guess kind of they all were.
But if you think about it like that, yeah.
Exactly. But that's also a world I really love, and I think more and more writers are starting to blend these two genres, and you can look at people like James Rollins, and see that while he writes modern day, a lot of his stuff is very technically based and pushes right into that edge of science fiction. So I think more and more of us are starting to fall into this new genre.
So we've got Echelon out, Empire coming out on the 30th, and this is a trilogy, as I've said a few times. So can you give us a glimpse of what's in store for book number 3, which when we last talked was Untitled, but have you got a one-word E title for that yet?
Yeah, I got to find another E title.
Oh.
Well, it kind of, the main idea is to fill out the arc of Ryan's journey, and that also would conclude, or not conclude, but would find an endpoint for the arc of the world he's in as well. If the first book was really, Echelon was really about control. The second book is about chaos, which is, when that, I guess I should say that Empire starts where most science fiction ends. Big Brother is dead, freedom reigns. Yeah. What happens the next day? And the answer is there's a lot of chaos, both for the world and for the guy who took down Big Brother.
That's right.
It's a traumatic time. So that's what Empire is about. And the third book will hopefully wrap those two into a finale that will again be exciting and fun to read.
Well, everyone who reads the first 2, I know, is going to look forward to the third. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the Marketplace of Ideas.
Oh, thank you very much. And if anyone in the Santa Barbara area wants to come visit, I'll be signing at Borders on November 15th.
That's right. Book signing, Borders 15th. Make sure you get there.
Well, thanks very much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Visit Josh Conviser's website at www.joshconviser.com. That's JoshConviser.com. All of the Marketplace of Ideas music is produced by Ben Althouse. Check out his website, benalthouse.com. That's BenAlthouse. He's also been known to go under the names Ice Ben and DJ Concept. Check out his grooves on benalthouse.com. Be sure to check out our website, www.colinmarshallradio.com/marketplace. All feedback, please direct to colin@colinmarshallradio.com, and we hope to see you soon on the next episode of the Marketplace of Ideas.